There's the man. Hey, Bodhi.
Good morning, Will. Good morning, Christopher, wherever you are.
Yeah, I'm here.
Christopher. Meet Bodhi. Bodhi, meet Christopher. Bodhi is in the jungle in Maui, and Christopher is in Prescott, Arizona.
Oh, beautiful Prescott.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Great place to be. Very easy town to live in.
So I can imagine where you are, Bodhi, somewhere there in your off the grid jungle cabin, beautiful spot. Oh, yeah, thank you. Cool.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris Bodhi lives with his wife, family in Twin Falls, which they've developed as just an essential stopping over spot in Maui. It's beautiful. Waterfalls, streams, jungle. I mean, it just blows people's minds when they visit there for the first time.
It's a beautiful model of private ownership, sharing it with the public.
It is. Yeah. And you've really developed that in the last, what, 10 years?
We've been there 30 years now.
Well, I know you've been there that long, but that model you just mentioned where you kind of ramped it up with the parking lot and
Well,
the,
it kind of came from the beginning when our partners and us decided right from the get-go it already was a place, as you know, Will, that people would come to these falls even before we bought it. And right from the beginning, we decided we were going to keep it open, and over the years have planted it as it's a beautiful organic farm and a botanical park, and have protected public access and improved it. And yeah, it's a wildlife park, and it might be the third most popular attraction on Maui right now. Everybody wants to see a waterfall.
Yeah, we had heard about the falls, and somebody mentioned that it was private, but they let you come. That's how they described it. And so we went in there, and it was truly spectacular. I would have to say it is one of the attractions I remember most about the island.
Beautiful. And maybe you know this, Will, that we once a month we don't let tourists in. It's only for local people once a month.
yep. Yeah, we've done that, and it's you can feel the difference. The tourists are kind of looky-loos, gawking around, and I mean, it's wonderful to have that available for them. But the residents, it's like this is part of my home. It's
Oh, it's a
different.
breath of fresh air for a lot of these old timers to
Yeah,
finally be in a beautiful place without tourists running around.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And for us on the other side, as you know, Tashina and I live in Kihei, Maui Meadows, 6 months of the year, and it's still Hawaii, but it's so civilized that we love coming to Twin Falls or the Iao Valley to experience what Hawaii really is.
Yeah,
Yes,
so I'm
Yeah,
thanks for doing
honored,
it.
honored to be part of this story playing out here.
Yeah.
And thanks,
well,
Will. Thank you for inviting me on here and bringing Christopher in. Thank you.
yeah. Well, we're really looking forward to learning more, and Will knows about your endeavor, your mission, so to speak. And I'd love to learn more about it and have you describe it so that our viewers and listeners can hear what it is you do, in addition to the wonderfully unique thing you do with this amazing reserve that you've created. Um, you have another, I think, very unique service that you provide that is something that I'm not sure I've heard of anybody who does what you do. So I want to learn more about it and have you tell me what it is, how you got into it, how you hope it continues, and what led you to this.
Beautiful. You want me to just jump right in?
Jump right in.
Okay. I've been an ordained minister in a Sufi lineage for about 40 years now, and that's really at the core of what guides me and what I choose to do, where I want to put my energy, and have put it for quite some time. And in terms of what really helps people, what really supports people to wake up, to come into a real true relationship with themselves and with God, or whatever name you give to that word. And sooner or later, it led me to counseling. And in that counseling, I ran into people who were either grieving, or somebody had just died, or they were dying. I realized I didn't feel skillful enough to I had the heart and I had the presence and the listening, which maybe are the key pieces to any counseling session. But I wanted to learn more. So that led me to become a hospice volunteer. The hospice volunteer training transformed me completely in about 3 weeks. Then
Wow.
they started calling me up. Would you go sit at this home of these strangers while the wife takes a walk or buys groceries? Sure, sure. And so now I'm in the home of somebody who's dying. I'd never seen anybody, and I had never witnessed somebody in there dying. How do people
Mhm.
actually do this thing? Or what I learned fairly quickly was, how do people refuse to do this thing? And that was a big learning in terms of what does it look like, and how do people either respond to it or refuse to engage with it. And now what that's come to me now is like, are you willing to uh, accept and maybe even embrace your dying face forward? Because
Wow.
too many people we're backing into their dying and their death.
That's kind of the cultural norm. I mean, doctors
Absolutely.
doctors fail 100% of the time because their goal is to extend life, and life always ends in a human body. So, I mean, you're dealing with a prevailing paradigm.
And sometimes, in fact, that's the phrase, that word itself, death as failure. That word certainly still shows up, or death as punishment. Um,
Wow. Yeah. I've never thought of it backing into it. I mean, that was a really uh, kind of a good way of thinking about it, that it's very resistant. I think you said they were resistant to the process.
the variations on that is, I'm not dying, I'm not dying, I'm not dying. Everybody's dying, everybody's dying, everybody's dying. And turn up the TV or whatever it is.
Oh,
I'm not
wow.
going to be I'm not going to be here while this is happening.
You
And
know,
very
there's that Woody Allen quote that what you just said reminded me of. He said it as a joke, but he said, "I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to be there when it happens."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's in a culture, basically, as you spoke to, Will, aversion, denial, and avoidance. Everybody wants to live a long time. Everybody wants to be healthy, but nobody really wants to die. In fact, hardly anybody wants to turn into an old person.
Right.
I ask people, "Are you an old person?" Uh, Very few people. I had a radio show for a while, and I would actually and it was about death and dying and wisdom and elders and aging. And I'd be in the coffee shop and I'd see somebody that was clearly in their 80s. And I would go up to them and I would say, "Excuse me, are you an old person?" And they would look at me like, do we need to call security, kind of thing. And then right away, I would explain who I was and that I wanted to interview old people on my radio show. And then he would talk to me, or she would talk to me, and sometimes they'd come on my radio show. But to actually come up to somebody and say, "Excuse me, are you an old person?" You don't say that. It's not right. It's kind of almost taboo to say that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So from sitting with dying people, I started going, well, what's going on in this whole field? And I've had a number of businesses. So I was actually looking at, what are the hospitals? How do they relate to it? We kind of have a good idea about how churches relate to it and religions relate to it. It's like religions, for the most part, about afterlife, not about the actual dying part of it. Um, Hospitals are like, we'll try everything. We'll keep going. We'll try everything, on and on and on. I looked at what the hospice movement was doing. And as a hospice volunteer, I was kind of intimate with the hospice here on Maui, and was actually studying nationwide that the hospice movement, the people who'd started it, were these good-hearted people that did it for the sake of volunteering to make something happen that needed to happen in America. Well, those people kind of have aged out or are aging out, and it's become a career path. And as it's become a career path, at the same time, there's so much money through Medicare,
Yeah.
insurances, that the for-profit movement has moved right into hospice big time. And there's obvious ways that has changed and is changing hospice itself. And then I looked what was happening in the alternative communities. And of course, Ramdas had been doing quite a bit of work with, a number of people. And of course, the Buddhists, who are the ones that really at least talk about it. And I thought, well, there's room for something else. And then I sat with that, and something came to me about what has become Doorway into Light. And I said to my wife Leila, let's start an organization, basically to draw out the community, at least on Maui. But it turned out right away people from all over the country came to the first event we did in 2006. To basically, our intention was to gather a community to see who's interested in this conscious, awakened, compassionate care of the dying and dying. And I happened to be a neighbor of Ram Dass's, and I got to go over there. We all got to go over there on weekends. And I offered to do some work because they didn't have a screwdriver at the time. And I ended up in Ram Dass's room with Ram Dass working on a project in his bedroom. And of course, he was the ultimate rock star for me. It wasn't rock stars or movie stars. It was Ram Dass. But Ram Dass right away were like, let's talk. I'm not on a pedestal here. Let's just. And then he heard what I was doing, or what I was beginnings of Doorway into Light. And right away he said, I'll help you. Oh, really?
Wow.
Oh, yeah, I've been doing this for 40 years, which of course I knew. And he said, I'll help you. And then on we went, basically starting to create these educational programs that we held on Maui. People would come, and then in between those, we were continuing a conversation with these people that were starting to become a community. He started inviting people he knew, Joan Halifax, Dale Borglum, Frank Ostaseski, I don't know who else, but people that people knew. And
Right.
so then we were a presence now, not just in the Maui community, but in the world community, really.
Let's talk about Doorway into Light, because I'm sensing, our listeners, our viewers, may be fascinated, but there's such an aversion to the topic. And maybe one way to kind of get under the hood is to get very grounded. What do you do? Like, what are the programs? What does Doorway into Light actually do?
Okay, we're about there. So along those lines, we started doing programs, and those programs were the logistical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual work of preparing for one's own death. At the same time, we started doing trainings for people that wanted to care for dying people. And we started attracting actually doctors and nurses and professionals in the field who wanted a deeper relationship with how to care for dying people, recognizing that it's not just a medical event. In fact, a medical event is a small part of what dying really is. Along that way, I ended up starting a funeral home without even knowing I was starting a funeral home. Initially, it was an office, and I found out I could be a funeral director in Hawaii because if I wasn't going to embalm and cut people up. And then I started making caskets because I saw what the caskets were costing on Maui, and I'm a crafter and a woodworker, and I started making these beautiful, simple pine box caskets, and opened up an office. And without even knowing it, I had created a funeral home here on Maui. And in fact, I came home one day and said to Leila, because I went and talked to the funeral home downtown, and I went home and said to my wife, "Guess what? We have a funeral home." And it was just like that. It was just like that. And it turns out it's the only not-for-profit funeral home in America right now,
Wow.
right here on Maui.
That's
in Haiku.
yeah, that's remarkable. I mean, the accidental funeral home. I mean, it's
The accidental funeral home. That's good.
Yeah.
So then I thought, well, I want to transform what it is, what it feels like, what it looks like, what the experience is. And then I took the model from the surf shop. It used to be you'd go into the surf shop and all they were doing in there were making surfboards. The next incarnation was they moved the surfboards to the back, and in the front became the surfboard culture, the look, the style, right? Of course, the incarnation that's happening now is if you go into one of those surf shops, nobody's making surfboards. That's happening somewhere else, and it's all the life, the look. And I thought, well, I want to do something like that with the funeral home. So I want to have some kind of retail presence in the front as kind of an invitation, halfway house, or open. Actually, it's an open house now, open every single Saturday as an open invitation. Come see what we're doing. Come meet the local funeral directors. Come look at caskets and urns. Come have any kind of conversations. Come get materials to educate yourself in terms of logistical, getting your things in order, so to speak, and hear about the programs and trainings that we're doing. And we decided, or actually I'll own it, I decided right away that the front the whole place was Doorway into Light's funeral home, but the front section that was kind of like the storefront is the death store.
Right.
And people around the world have heard of the death store. It's kind of like in this overload. We're not in the information world anymore. We're in the overload information. And so if somebody says, "Yeah, we went to the death store," everybody stops and goes, "What did you say?"
Right.
And people around the world have contacted us about the death store, and people from the US have come to see, what is this, the death store? What exactly is going on here? And it's not really a store, but store is one of the most neutral, innocuous words there is.
Do you use
The
Death
Death
Cafe?
Cafe. Yeah.
Well, I would love to add a cafe component to it where all the tables and chairs are urns and coffins. And that's coming in another incarnation, along with the vision of a land-based dying center. And we can get into that story further on. But so what has developed in terms of what you asked me, Will, was we've done this online training now for 7 years called Facing Death, Nourishing Life, to one, bring death awareness more alive. Because if I ask 100 people, and I do quite often, how many of you know you're going to die and you don't know when? 100 people raise their hand like, everybody knows that, Bodhi. What a dumb question. Well, it turns out everybody knows it like they know the capital of Wisconsin, that it's a piece of information that's in our heads. We don't really know that we're going to die, as it turns out. We know other people die because we actually see that. But I think for the most part, we don't, it's not an embodied, realized truth where we live in the reality every day that we're going to die and we don't know when. Not like walking on a razor's edge, but the recognition that we don't have more time that we imagine we do. Maybe we don't, but we assume we do. In fact, we get up in America, which is fairly unique, I think, in the world. We get up in America assuming we have more time. In fact, one of the practices I teach is before you get out of bed, say something like, "Wow, I woke up." And come into that realization that it's not a given.
I've had two near-death experiences, so I'm very aware of the fact that we die. And after the second one, in particular, just everything around it, for years, and still to an extent now, but less so, but literally for at least 15 years, every morning I woke up, it was, I'm alive. And it was just this amazing realization that I'm alive and that I have another day, and that I get to feel all the things we feel and see what we see and encounter what we encounter by being alive. As it's gradually faded somewhat over a couple of decades, it is one of the best residual effects of having died and come back.
Beautiful. One thing that really showed up for me, and you've all experienced this, is that when somebody finds out that their friend just died or their family member just died, or that they got a terminal diagnosis, something happens to everybody I've encountered. Everybody has, as far as I can see, the exact same experience. They stop. And in that stopping, all the crap, there's no room for bullshit. There's no room for nonsense. There's no room for anything but the truth and the recognition of how precious and fragile it all is. Now, as near as I can tell, everybody pretty much has that exact experience. Yeah. In my world, that's a very spiritual experience. That's the point of spiritual practice, to come into full embodied living here and now, to show up and not save it for tomorrow or the next day. And when you're standing in front of somebody you're talking to, you're bringing it all to that moment, because we've all had the experience. I wish that wasn't the last time I saw that person or spoke to that person. And so death awareness in that sense has the potential, strong potential, to be the strongest spiritual wake-up tool I've experienced. And I've been around a lot of spiritual practices and communities. Nothing seems to shake people quicker into the here and now presence of how precious and fragile it all is than this experience, which I call a close encounter with death.
Well,
Right?
Bodhi, can you talk a little more about your program? This kind of format, like an online program that lasts over a period of time, gives you the space to really get into all the things you're talking about. This isn't a one-off kind of deal where you suddenly have an epiphany and come to terms with dying. It seems it would take a sustained focus to really do that.
I ask people actually to make it a 7 day a week practice. We meet 2 times a week for 2 hours on Zoom. But I ask people to make it a 7 day practice, and I ask people to set up a specific space in their home dedicated to this training we're doing together as an altar specifically for this course. And then we developed that. One of the things, having done this for so many years, I've gotten pretty good at breaking through this two-dimensional thing we do to where there's real connection. There's really hard, not just from me, but from everybody. And real community is cultivated because we're talking about something that's so raw and so personal. And as we develop the safe space for people to start sharing freely, it's very powerful. What is shared, which of course is what deepens community. The fact that people are in their cozy, love their cozy, couch with their pillows and their stuffed toys and their food nearby actually adds to them feeling more comfortable. We're not in a room together, and in some ways that makes it more comfortable to touch on this material. Mm. So the material itself in this course is about the work of preparing for death. Well, why bother? That's what people say to me. Why bother? I'll deal with it when I get there. And I've seen both those scenarios, and actually, for the most part, people that just deal with it when they get there often experience a tremendous amount of suffering, anxiety, fear, dread, on and on and on. And while people who actually do some preparation may have those same things, but will have some preparation embedded in their being, because I hear from people all the time about it. That's the one step: the emotional, psychological, logistical, and spiritual work. Because in America, people die of congestive heart failure to a large degree. That's one of the leading causes of death. Right. Well, that's, in my view, that's not just the physical heart, that's the emotional, psychological heart, and that's the spiritual heart. And most people are, as far as I can see, are very congested in the emotional, psychological heart and the spiritual heart. And the work of preparing for death is to go into how to decongest, to bring everything up to date, to work on the trail behind us, unfinished business, relationships, on and on and on. And that's preparing for death. And it turns out that work itself is critical, in my view, in being capable and useful in caring for other dying people, whether they're your loved ones or whether they're strangers. Mm-hmm. To have done the work, personal work, to me, becomes critical, in my view, to how we can fully engage and show up and be useful in the care of the dying people. And then the third component of this training is, how do we show up for the dying that's happening in the world, for the world that is changing so fast, which is really the same skills, it's the same practices, because it's the same sense of recognizing the truth of impermanence. And of course, so many people now are either overwhelmed or depressed or in complete denial and aversion to what is happening in the world right now.
It occurred to me, and it's not just a play on words, that you're really doing open heart surgery.
I call it open heart surgery.
So, Bodhi, I'm always curious about origins, and you're working in a field that I think it's fair to say many people would rather avoid. Both their personal death and even just being around the subject. And yet, this is something you've been drawn deeply into. I'm just curious, as you look back on your life, do you see inklings of this early on? Is this always something you've been interested in, or was there a sudden event that threw you into this? What started you? What tracked you through this field?
That's a great question. Well, I like to play dead when I was a kid.
Well, I'm glad you were a failure at it.
Oh, I succeeded. My mom would just like, well, can't deal with him. He played dead. I'm not sure. I could tell you a story. Really, I think I know what a calling is. Something called me, and the way so many people want purpose. Purpose is something you either you want to attract, you want to find, but at the same time, in that opening to it, it's coming towards you in that opening. And I teach about what a calling is, because where does it come from, and what does it mean, and what's the responsibility? I'm very fortunate in that this is a calling that called me really out of the blue. One thing led to the other. I could tell you that when I was 17, a week before I graduated high school, my dad suddenly died unexpectedly in a car accident. That was the first time I'd been around a dead person. That was shattering right at a time when I was graduating high school, starting to smoke pot and take LSD, and signing up to be drafted for the Vietnam War, which there was no way I was going to go. Right.
Yeah.
You're both kind of in that same generation, so you understand. So that really was the beginning of a giant shift of dropping out of school and learning how to grow food and become a hippie. And I've never stopped being a hippie. I'm so proud of it. But so that was, in a sense, a turning. But honestly, I don't know how it happened. But again, my foundation is ministry. And that led me into, wow, the field of death and dying. And then looking around and seeing, again, how our culture treats it, how the hospitals and hospice treat it, how we all relate to it and don't relate to it, in that avoidance and aversion. And now I'm convinced that if you don't have a living relationship with the truth of your impermanence, you're not fully alive. And of course, I'm sure you've run into people that have had cancer or have cancer and say, wow, I never felt so alive in my life. Yeah. Now, to me, that's a very sad thing, that it takes death to wake people up to be fully alive. Right. It's like the other sad piece is how many people all of a sudden want to come care for you when you're dying, but haven't called you in years.
Right.
That kind of thing. Though, those, what were we waiting for, kind of thing. And the same with, wow, I never felt so alive. Well, I don't want to wait till I get a diagnosis to become fully alive and show up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, reminding me of something one of the people in the Zen Sangha I was in, there was a comment similar to that. I don't want to have to wait for a diagnosis before I become fully alive. And his response was, guess what? You already have a diagnosis. You're going to die. So is it time for you to wake up and enjoy the life you have before that happens? We already do have a diagnosis. All of us have a terminal diagnosis. We are going to die. But I don't think we're present to that. And to your point, we hide from that. We avoid it. We don't want to deal with it. And you were talking about how sometimes friends will come out of the woodwork, so to speak, to help somebody when they're dying. And just the reverse, sometimes people who've been very close to them will run for the hills because they're just not in a place where they're willing to be able to handle it and deal with it and be in the space and the reality of the temporary nature of our existence in this dimension.
Yeah. If you know you're gonna die, as everybody says they do, why would you be surprised if you found out it was today? Why would you be surprised if you got a diagnosis? Well, you knew you were going to die and you didn't know when. And so, but again, how realized and embodied is that? And I'm not saying it wouldn't put me through something if I got a diagnosis today that et cetera, et cetera. But I'm more prepared, and the people we train and teach are more prepared to meet that.
I'd love to zero in on the dying process itself, because you have the rare experience of, in your hospice work, sitting with people who are right on the edge of death. And I was listening to a podcast with Zach Bush, the holistic doctor, and he talked about being in hospice care as a doctor. And at the moment of death, his perception was that people's antenna just expanded to bring in far more information, and that the person realized their human life was a very tiny bit of the whole of what life really was. I'm curious what your experience has been with people as they actually went through that transition.
Yeah, well, you get to be dead way longer than you were alive. So that's one piece of it. I've only been around one person as they took their last breath. And my work is more about leaving in peace, not resting in peace. But I think we're supposed to rest in peace while we're alive. Uh, After we're dead, we may get 2 weeks off in a little cabana on the beach, and then it's back reassigned or something. But leaving in peace, I think is not. I think that's where the area that I engage in. Not at the edge of death, not we all have a terminal diagnosis, but what happens when you find out you are in fact dying? And I've heard dying people say, well, we're all dying, which is kind of like this, the variation of we all have a terminal diagnosis. Yeah, but we're not all dying. Dying people are doing something we're not doing. And very much so, they're doing things we're not doing, right? We're on the train of life, and we're moving forward, and we got plans, and we got appointments, and we got dreams we want to do, and inspirations we want to live out. And that train is going by, and dying people are not on that train anymore. And that's quite a big realization, to recognize that train of life is moving on and they're not on it. That's one of the things that dying people are doing that we're not doing, right? Very different. Like that's the dying. Everybody says, well, we're all dying. Well, yeah, sometimes a divorce is certainly a dying. There are lots of things like that are deaths. Your favorite chocolate bar is gone from the shelf in the store, and you so wanted that chocolate bar. But whatever it is, all the little and bigger deaths, and of course, how we meet those in terms of how quickly we can let go and embrace that moment will greatly support us when we actually are dying. But as far as what dying people are going through, that's again comes back to why this emotional, psychological work and spiritual work. Because when you're dying, one of the signs of dying is you are losing things.
Right. Falling away.
Things are falling away. So, and it's not, and that physical thing is a gigantic psychological thing.
Yeah.
Who am I when I can't do that? When that doesn't work? When I'm not known as that person? When I can't do my favorite things?
Yeah.
When I run out of money? On and on and on, right? Then there's the spiritual aspect of, well, no, before I get to the spiritual aspect, there's the relation to self, where all the self-loathing, self-hatred, self-judgment can emerge, and just lessen the way to push it back down, right? Then there's the community level of relationship. It's all relationship to self. What is the work we need to do in terms of letting go of the toxic stuff we carry? In terms of community, what is our relationship? Did we add value to the community? Did we make widgets for a company that didn't care about us for 40 years? Did we contribute, or we did just take up space? How did my community think of me? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the spiritual piece is there something that's going to help carry me in the midst of everything falling away and ending? Whatever beliefs I had, are they real? Oftentimes they're fairly hollow. Yeah. And it turned out it didn't matter how many Tonkas and Buddhas you had hanging in your house. Yeah. What happened, what mattered was it real? Was it a living thing? And so those are the things we go into in this 7-week online course, to do the work, and also the work of, hey, what are you going to do with your stuff? Because what's going to happen with your stuff? I mean, your stuff in your house, your important things. What do you want to do with that stuff? Do you care? Do you want to get buried? Do you want to get cremated? Do you want to think about this stuff? Well, let's think about it. Yeah. And these are the ramifications if you choose any one of those. Yeah. And why you don't want to leave strangers to clean up your house. What paperwork you ought to have in place. Right. Why you need to see an MD once a year. Yeah. So you don't have to someone doesn't have to call the police when you die because some doctor knows why you died. I mean, all of the nitty gritty ground floor stuff, and the emotional, psychological, and spiritual work, which basically is the work we all ought to be doing every day to bring it up to date. Because even if we do that work today, there'll be more tomorrow. There is for me. I'll fall down later today again, and probably need to apologize for it.
So you cover all of that in your course, right? Let's just give people a little idea of what happens there. You get into all those details, the inner and the outer.
We do, and we touch on grief, which maybe is the most congested piece of our emotional psychological body. Is we're death illiterate. We're just starting to come out of it in this country, but we're as you said, we are death illiterate and we are grief illiterate, and we don't understand the importance and the power, the critically importance of our grief and what we do with it, and how critically important it is for our community to witness our grieving. That's what mourning is, to be witnessed. And that takes courage. And we don't do that on the first week. We got to get there. We got to cultivate a safe enough space. In fact, sometimes the safe space we cultivate is, for some people, that's the most important thing they experience in the whole course, what it feels like to be in safe space. We know how unsafe it is out here, and especially for women. And we know the world is much less safe than it was when we were kids, or at least it looked that way. So to cultivate real safe space for the hearts to have their voices.
I think we've all witnessed in our typical culture where there's very little patience for the grief process, let alone the mourning process. And just quick anecdote, I had a client who came to me. I was doing leadership coaching with him, and he said, I don't know what to do. One of my best employees, who happened to be Native American, left to go to his grandfather's funeral, and it's been 3 weeks and he's not back yet. And I I I don't know whether he's abandoned the job or if I should give it to somebody else. And I said, well, what do you know about his culture's process around death and dying? And he went, oh, I don't know, but I mean, we have a 3-day bereavement policy. Uh, you know, well, long story short, his employee came back. I think it was around the end of the 4th week. And he said to him, I was about to give your job away to someone else. And, the employee said, I understand. That would have been okay. And he said, why were you gone so long? And he said, my grandfather died. And that was the answer. And so just that realization that we have so compressed that grieving and mourning process down to the convenience of an HR policy, to where to realize that this employee, had this deep relationship with his grandfather that he was not going to shortcut in order to fit that policy. And if they had to give his job away, that was okay. And I was really struck by that. It was like, wow, that is so outside the norm and so healthy.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's so outside the norm. Well, we're a business culture. We're viewed as consumers, not as sovereign citizens. And in a business culture, it's all about efficiency and speed. And that's why this whole notion in our culture, concept of get over it and get back to work, right? Because it's inefficient to bring your grieving either to work or with your stay away for months, right? It's inefficient. It's so that's part of the problem. I do a lot of grief counseling, which now really I think of myself more as a grief cheerleader, because people are like, why aren't I over it? Well, when did your husband die? Oh, 6 months ago. Well, in death time, 6 months ago is last week, for one thing. And the notion that you need to get over it is a concept that isn't real and isn't healthy. Don't ever get over it. Why would you ever get over how that your heart can hurt about somebody you love so much that's not right here to hug? Why get over it? It becomes, actually, in my view, it becomes a gift, this precious gift we get to carry.
Yeah. There's an Eagles song, Don Henley, you may remember. It's called Get Over It. And he says, get over it, get over it. I'd like to take your inner child and kick his little ass. And, it's a fun rock and roll song, but this is the message. Get over it. It's in the past. Move on with your life. I wanted to ask you, because you talked about congestive heart failure and, the epidemic of heart failure in America and throughout the world. Do you sense that that's connected to our aversion to grieving? Because I do. I feel that the lack of grieving taxes the heart. We're supposed to be grieving, and the fact that we shut that out is a burden on the heart. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest congestive piece of the emotional psychological body is our unwillingness or inability to grieve. Our
Yeah.
friends want us to get over it. It's a cultural pressure to get over it. Your friends after a year go, how could you still be grieving? It's a year, or maybe you need to see someone. So, of course, the message is something's wrong,
Yeah.
right? Because most people are uncomfortable to go there. It's in a way it's an out of control experience, but in that sense, like I call love and grief twin sisters. We care, we love what we grieve about is what we love and care about, that it's either gone or is going. It's the same thing. It's love in a different language. And you don't hear people well, sometimes people are afraid to be in love because that is kind of an out of control experience. And grieving is too, but of course grieving isn't like butterflies and rainbows necessarily. And so people are tremendous fear to let go into it. I'm going to get lost, I'm going to drown. No, I don't see that happening. I've met people, their child just died and they wish they were dead and she wishes she was dead. And I say, look, do you have the opportunity and the freedom to get into bed and pull the covers over your head and stay there? Yeah. Well, I think that would be a good thing for you to do. Just stay there until it's time to come out and wail away and do whatever you need to do. And let's ask some of your friends to make sure you're eating and drinking and taking a walk in nature. But, dive right into it and you'll come out of it. And the people that I've seen come out of it are transformed in a way that their hearts got bigger and their presence and ability to show up for other people got bigger. I mean, by the time you're our age, how many times have you had your heart broken? And how can you recognize the gifts that came out of that, not in that moment, but as down the road, what was given to you. That's why I talk about the value of suffering.
We're talking about the death of our human family. I was reminded, is just thinking about this, of a client who she was sent to me to be coached because her dog of 20 years had passed and she was struggling. And I said, for after telling her I was sorry that had happened and learning about the dog and having her tell me about it, I said, how long ago did this happen? And she said, last week. I was like thinking to myself, and they're expecting her to just get over it because it was just a dog. I was like, no, it was her companion. Why should she get over it?
Yeah.
Some of the people that come into the funeral home, some of the most upset people are the ones whose dog died.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it seems to me there's a well of grief that it's all there. It's all there, that something shows up, like somebody just died or something just happened in the world. I mean, the fires in Spokane, I mean, God, cry your eyes out. And what I see is that opening up to that grief opens it all up. And then I hear about an abortion that happened 40 years ago that somebody's still grieving, for example, that there's this well of grief. And to recognize that as this gift that we get to carry as this like sacred bundle, of course, it's a whole shift in how it works and how we meet other people that are suffering. Because we, for the most part, in our grief illiteracy, we don't know how to be with people who are grieving.
No.
We don't know what to say, and we say stupid stuff, or we say nothing, or we stay away.
Yeah.
That's a whole area itself of education. How do we be with grieving? And that starts with how do we be with our own grieving? and
Yeah.
acknowledge that that's a real thing, that our hearts are hurting. And I've had grief circles here on Maui and other places where the first thing I do is I acknowledge people that would come to a grief circle, because it's an acknowledgement. It's an honest, courageous statement that is bearing witness to the rest of the circle that my heart hurts about something or someone. And that's a big deal, because mostly we want to carry on like we're okay, everything's fine, we're okay, we're doing great.
Yeah.
And that's hardly ever true for,
Yeah.
I don't know about anybody that's not being challenged right now and not, not hurting in some way, unless you're completely, somehow desensitized and turned off to what's going on.
One of the most memorable images of living with grief that I can remember is the movie Nell, where Jodie Foster's character as an adult goes back to the place where she lost her twin sister who died in their youth. And there's one angle the camera takes that captures her face filled with grief. And yet she's glad to be alive herself. And I've never forgotten that, because she's living with grief that will never go away. She lost her sister, and yet she's happily living, and yet it marked her forever. And I've remembered that, and I thought, wow, what a model. Your heart never fully heals. Why should it? It's not meant to be impervious to pain. So I think somebody who does come to your courses, and I want to hear a little more about that here before we close off, is very brave, because they're defying the whole culture that says get over it and then you'll get back to the way you were before. We never return. It's like losing a digit. When your finger's gone, it's gone. When your friend's gone, they're gone. They're not coming back.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just brave, it's a little scary, and people often acknowledge it. They're going to take a 7-week course and they don't really know what's going to come up.
Yeah. Well, can
Yeah,
you
the,
tell
the
people a little
grieving.
more
Go
about
ahead.
tell people a little more about the program just as we wind down? How do they get in touch with you? What's involved, the timing, and all that kind of stuff?
Well, early bird registration is August 15th. After that, it'll go back to standard tuition. There's 3 levels of tuition. There's financial aid tuition, there's standard tuition, and there's pay it forward tuition. We'll meet 2 times a week for 2 hours, Mondays and Thursdays, 10 o'clock Hawaiian time in the morning for 2 hours. And we will begin from the beginning. First breath in, and we'll end on last breath out.
Wow.
It's like on that tombstone, there's the birth date, there's the death date, and there's the line in between. That line is the time of your life. And that's what we're having. And that's what we're working on. In fact, people say, how you doing, Bodhi? And oftentimes I say, I'm having the time of my life. And they go, wow, that's cool. And I go, yep, that's what we're all having. It's exactly what we're having.
I've never thought of it that way. That's a good description. And this is all virtual. It's all online.
This is all virtual, and during the 2 hours together, I will teach. I will use images. We will break out into small groups. I'll give people homework. Well, of course, people don't like that word. I usually call it, home study,
Right.
or something. Homework. And then we break out into small groups, and then we talk amongst as a larger group. And that's pretty much the format. I teach. I use images. We break into small groups. 2 or 3 people, and then we come together, and then variations on all of that. I do a fun thing. There's a fun thing about Zoom. Like, how to pin somebody in Zoom?
Yeah.
So now there's 50 people on my screen, and I'll say, I want you all to pin somebody. They don't know who's looking at you.
Right.
And you just really look at that person.
Wow.
Look at the physical, look at that interesting nose, Will Scott, for example, or whatever. Okay, now see if you can go to the next level. So you're actually being stared at, but you're willing to be completely open.
Mm.
And you're staring where you're gazing deeply. I think that's one of my favorite, as far as what you can do on Zoom.
Right.
It's to really be able to freely look at someone deeply, and to willing to let somebody look at you deeply.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you probably have people come back and attend the course again.
I've had a few people take it 3 times now.
Yeah.
What do people report afterwards? What changes for them?
Well, I just heard from a woman who went to take care of her mom who was dying, and she said the course had given her the skill, so much skills, but also the confidence to
Mm.
be able to show up for her mom's dying.
Mm.
And I thought, that was powerful. And then she said, and I washed my mom's body, which I never would have been able to do without attending this class. In fact, she was at a funeral home, and the funeral home told her, "No, you can't do that. Our staff will do that." And she pleaded with them to let her wash her mother's body. And they finally agreed to it. And they were blown away. They said, "What you did was more beautiful and more effective than what 3 of us would have done. Your own mother." And then she said, "That's an experience that I'll carry for the rest of my life."
Yeah.
I mean,
Beautiful.
there's a testimonial,
Beautiful. Yeah.
and
Wow.
variations, all kinds of variations on, wow, my life is different every day now. Every day now, I wake up and go, wow, I have a day today. Things like that. In terms of that's my goal. I want to shift how we wake up and live our day, and that isn't that what the world needs right now. It needs us to get more conscious, become deeper people, and show up, especially show up where we're needed, and we're going to be needed all over the place more and more. That's the work. That's what it's about. And at the same
Yeah.
time, if I could help you meet your dying in some small way, your own dying time, then amen.
Yeah. 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 You were talking about Spokane, and I've been watching that with so just blown away. You may or may not know that the town Will and I lived in Ashland as well. The north end of our town and the 2 towns north of it burned to the ground. I think it was 2020.
I do know that.
And there were so many people who were basically stuck in mourning and just did not know how to process.
Yeah.
It wasn't that anybody they knew died, but their life as they knew it died.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And we had the Lahaina fire where a lot of culture died.
Yeah,
Those people in buildings, and it's happening all over the world, though. I mean, Zach Bush thinks that humanity itself is in a hospice moment. And he said he thinks we've got 10, 20 years left. And he sees it as a caterpillar to butterfly moment. It's transformation. It's not a final death. But in some way or another, I think everybody is feeling something that could be equated to impending death. So Bodhi, I just salute you for the work you're doing. I can't really think of much more work that's more important
literally.
than this, honestly.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, it's um, such a rare service, oddly, and one that is so deeply needed.
Yeah, I get a lot. What we're doing, I think, is actually unique, if not in the country, in the world, in terms of. We just had an experience of someone who died that was a big part of our community that we have in our facility now, and tomorrow we're going to take his body out in the ocean and bury him out in the ocean off of Maui. But in terms of his community having access to be with his dead body and to dress him and to make him beautiful with flowers and there was no clock running in terms of money. There was no meter running at all.
Yeah.
Right. That's a unique experience. Most every funeral home, people work on commission and they charge for everything.
Yeah.
Ours is ministry. Ours is supporting a community and helping a community um, participate and experience the whole thing, the
Yeah.
whole thing, and how and what it does to us as a community, and being part of it and connected to it is huge.
Yeah.
Really, it's huge, and it's amazing that we're the only not-for-profit funeral home because we're not selling anything. People come in and go, "Well, what's your elevator speech?" We don't have one. What are you selling? Well, these are the services we're offering, but we're not in the business of selling. We want to help you. We want to see what your needs are and if we can be useful in supporting you and what you need and what you want to see happen here. If somebody dies in your home, we suggest you keep that person home for a day or two. You don't die in a minute. Be with that body.
Yeah.
On and on and on. Come and help us wash that body,
Yeah.
brush their hair, shape them, dress them.
Yeah.
We've separated the thing too much, right? And because we've separated it in this culture, we don't see it. We're not around it. And we don't see something and we're not around it, we're afraid of it. It's unknown. And that adds to the fear, the terror, really.
Yeah.
That's why I want to build a park that has a funeral home, but a big community park where death and life are interweaving in healthy community life, instead of where the burial ground is some separate place you only go to if you won't even go to it.
Yeah.
And that's another piece we're disconnected from where our people are buried. That's
Yeah.
a big piece,
Yeah.
right? It's very unique that we don't, most of us don't live anywhere near where our people are buried. And in fact, America, apparently on the average, you move every 5 years. So very few people are close to where their people are buried. Consequently, we've lost what that relationship, the value of that relationship.
Yeah.
And of course, in most spiritual circles, the dead have either gone to heaven, or they've gone into the light, or they've transcended, or they've gone to their wedding ceremony, or on and on and on. And all of those stories tell us that they don't need us.
Yeah.
And that, again, is fairly unique to this culture.
Yeah.
And that is also a break in our relationship to ancestors, to our people. We even say, I lost my mom.
Yeah, well, I'm very close to where my parents were buried because they were cremated, and I stood on a rock in the Okanagan Valley in Canada to scatter their ashes, and as I, threw them up in the air, a wind came up and blew them back in my face. So I was covered in the bones of my ancestors, and I was so glad that happened. It wasn't an accident. That was what needed to happen. I needed to be bathed in the bones of my mother and father, and I consider that a gift from God. Bodhi, as we wind up here, I want to focus on one thing you said, which you just said a moment ago, which I think is so important, is the fear of the unknown. I mean, horror movies are all about that. Something springs out from the shadows. But with death, there's actually a deliberate not knowing. There's a deliberate avoidance of it. So I want to celebrate your course because really it's an invitation to make the unknown known. I mean, we're not going to know what our death is until it happens, but to become familiar with the territory, to actually consciously study it, the details, get into it. What do I want done with my body after I die? What, not just my will, but who do I need to connect with? What contracts in my relationships do I need to complete? What's unfinished? What's unresolved? This is a whole world of activity that is unknown for most people. No wonder they fear it. You're helping people make it known. Bravo.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. You could say death is, if not the only, one of the most known things there is,
Yeah.
right? And it's the most unknown about.
Yeah.
It's the least known about.
What a paradox. Total paradox.
Yeah, it's an utter certainty that we know very little about. Yeah.
The guy with the scythe in all black, lousy marketing.
Right.
Needs better marketing.
Need a better celebrity spokesperson. Well,
Well,
Bodhi, thanks so much for taking the time to sit with us and chat about what you're doing. And with the podcast, we'll post details for how people can connect with Doorway into Light and register for the course. I'll be there. you've invited me to take it, I'm going to do that. So thank you, and look forward to seeing you back on the island.
Thanks so much for inviting me, and really appreciated what the both of you brought to this conversation.
Thank you.
Great to meet you, Christopher.
Yeah, likewise. And, continue doing the great work you're doing.
May it be so.